Thank you everyone for joining us today on this webinar. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. You're all muted, but we encourage you to use the chat feature for comments and the Q&A feature for any questions. We'll be addressing those questions at the end of this session. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our hosts, Cheryl and Tony.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today, and also thanks for your registration questions, which we will cover. I'm Cheryl Last from Skill Director, and I'm joined by our CEO, Tony Charles.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today.
Now, we always ask pre-webinar questions to understand the needs of the people attending. And without fail, no matter what the webinar is, the number one question we're always asked is, how do I convince leaders that we need to do something different? Now, while research proves that leaders worldwide seem to understand that skill gaps are their biggest challenge, and skills are changing rapidly, requiring upskilling and reskilling, many still believe that you just need to do more of the same classes and e-learning that you've always done, and that magically something's going to change. I mean, it's just not possible to formally train as fast as people need new skills. So with the speed of business, skill gaps are growing, while the time available for training is practically non-existent.
Great. So, you see some really compelling data points from the World Economic Forum here on the screen, and you might ask yourself, right, what does this mean to me? I mean, these are obviously global macroeconomic insights, but they do tell us that our need to keep pace with upskilling, it's not isolated and it's not transitory, right? This challenge is not going away. And I think what's really important is that how each of us responds to the pressures is going to have a long-lasting impact on our businesses. So if you just take these points in, right? 42% of jobs are going to require different skills in the next 3 years, and over 1 billion workers will need reskilling by 2030. And we know that based on the complexity of the job or the skills needed, it could take up to a year to reskill someone. And I think what's really compelling is this idea that on average, the shelf life of a skill is now down to 2 to 3 years. This really reinforces the importance of not just thinking about how we're going to address our current upskilling needs, but how do we build a culture where upskilling is continuous and part of the landscape, just the general corporate landscape. But to do that, we need to have mechanisms in place and ask ourselves, what mechanisms do we have to continuously evaluate our organization's skills and then provide the tools that allow employees to effectively upskill. If we have the right culture and the right tools to support that culture, your organization is going to be able to either effectively react to unexpected changes, obviously pandemic, potential recession, as well as proact as our company strategies shift. And that's the nimbleness and competitive advantage that you get from making learning agility a core value and supporting it with tools and processes and procedures and goals, right? And to that point, I know you know this, I'm pretty sure your leaders know this, the challenge is translating all of this into meaningful, quantified insights specific to your business. Quantifying the problem is essential for any business leader to be able to take action, right? We don't take action unless we have the data to support taking those big actions. So today we're going to build a business case that can help you and your organization's leaders understand the financial implications of the skill gap problem facing you, and then importantly, give you the data you need to address the problem in a new way, which means changing the status quo. All of this is to say, we want to help you quantify the impact of shifting from a traditional L&D model focused on training to one focused on learning. Now, industry research shows there are 6 quantifiable impacts of skill gaps. Each one of these can affect profitability, operational effectiveness, competitiveness, and sometimes, depending on the marketplace, it could affect the very survival of your company if they're not addressed. So we'll take a look at these together.
Okay, so one of the impacts of skill gaps is loss of productive time. If you don't have the skills to do your job, it takes you longer. You have to figure it out. You may even have to ask someone to help you to do it, which will also take up their time. So if you increase professional development time, and that development's good, then you increase productivity by almost the same amount. Or, said a different way, if you don't develop, then you decrease productivity in the same way.
Now, having long job vacancies means that, someone or several people are doing the work of the person who's not there, right? So that means that the person or people taking on extra responsibilities, they can't do their own job at 100% or either job at 100%. Inevitably, they are stressed, they're overworked, potentially burned out. And by the way, this applies to intentional vacancies, right? There was a PwC study published last month that was conducted across 700 US executives and board members. In that survey, 52% of companies say they're going to implement a hiring freeze or have already implemented a hiring freeze. Another 18% say they're expecting to do so in the near future. That's 70% of companies are already or expect to put a hiring freeze in place. And then this extends further as almost 20% are also rescinding job offers actively. I've personally spoken with a number of companies who are in this situation of pausing hiring or even considering layoffs, depending on how the economy moves. And every leader that I'm personally speaking with is worried about making sure they have their organization's skills mapped and inventoried, and then a plan in place for pivoting the organization. And they're using this obviously to help shape corporate or departmental strategy.
Really great insight, Tony. Next one is excessive turnover. So if you're not getting developed and you don't see a future in your organization, you're going to leave and go somewhere you can. And this is particularly important if you're skilled and your skills are in demand. Turnover costs are high. And while not all turnover is bad and can be prevented, it's the excessive turnover that you want to avoid.
Yeah, that's right. That excessive or regrettable turnover Cheryl mentioned is what we need to avoid, right? So, if people leave because of lack of development, they're likely to go to your competition. That's the industry they know. So not only do you lose their contribution, but your competition gains it, which is obviously a double hit, a double whammy.
And if you don't feel like your organization is investing in you, then you're less likely to be engaged. And that lack of engagement impacts lots of things. So according to Gallup, that includes higher absenteeism and turnover, as well as lower productivity, lower sales, lower customer metrics, and lower profitability.
And then when it comes to innovation, let me give you an example. In 2001, Apple hired away from Real Networks an engineer named Tony Fadell, who had an idea while he was there at his previous two firms. He had this idea for a small hard disk-based music player and an online store for music. Now, at first, Tony was a contractor at Apple. But when Steve Jobs heard about Tony's idea, he quickly hired Tony into a full-time executive role and put him in charge of the product design that led to the first iPod and later the iPhone. In that move, Real Networks, who had the opportunity, they knew about his idea, but chose not to act on it. In that very move, Real Networks lost and Apple gained literally billions in revenue and market capitalization by inviting and looking for innovation everywhere, right? Without skills, including skills for what's coming next. We call them skills of the future or power skills at Skill Director. Without those skills embedded in your organization, baked in, encouraged and inculcated, there is going to be a deficit in people being able to effectively innovate. And innovators are those who are highly skilled and have foresight. You need to help them prepare for and deliver what comes next. I mean, they're really the lifeblood of the organization. And you can foster this innovation by creating a learning culture where employees are encouraged to think critically and creatively.
Okay, so I want you to stop and think about what you just heard. Based on this research, stop and think about how they could affect the goals of your organization. Put yourself in your leader's shoes. Now, what are the chances that they can achieve their goals without engaged, productive, and innovative people? What about not having the people you need because of excessive turnover and long job vacancies? What if all your best, most innovative people end up at your competitors? What if one of these problems exists in your organization? What if they all do? What happens if there are issues for you, but not for your competition? What happens then? So we tell you all of this because you can be part of the solution. Build a culture of learning that ensures people are continuously upskilled and reskilled. Invest in people's development, and they'll be more engaged and productive. You'll be able to recruit and retain the best, most innovative minds so that you can instead blow away the competition. Now, you may not believe it, but as learning professionals, we have not only the opportunity, but the responsibility to drive this change. We can't afford to stand by and just be order takers. Now, of all the challenges that you face, the biggest usually is getting leaders to see me as a part of the solution. So if you're ready to be part of that solution, let's take a look at how to do that.
All right, great. So the meat of the matter here, the business case. You know, if you've had to create a business case in the past to justify some of your learning initiatives, some of this may be quite familiar to you. However, and Cheryl mentions at the top, you know, we're often asked how to create a business case, especially what data do I include? And so we're going to pick just one of the 6 impacts that we'll review in a moment and show you the process. And then we're going to give you a template, and that's important. We're going to give you the tools that you can download at the end that contains all the others. And then you can pick which ones to present to your leaders based on what you think or know will be most impactful in your organization. So let's get started, right? Our goal here is to develop a business case that you can present to leaders that helps them understand the high cost of skill gaps and how developing a culture of learning is critical to the bottom line. Excuse me. Now, the first step is to identify which of these impacts of skill gaps are most relevant to your organization. And they're all likely to have some relevance, but you're looking to put up some big numbers that connect to the pain that your organization and the leaders feel. So let's get started with a quick poll. If you could just take a moment, and you could do multi-select here. So select 1 or 2 of the impacts that you think are most important in your organization. We'll give everyone a chance to think about this and importantly, consider not just which impacts are affecting you right now as an organization, but also consider which are likely to be the most costly.
Okay, interesting. So lack of engagement, well, it's funny because so many of them are so high. The top one looks to be lack of engagement. And if you think about it, presenting a business case to your leadership that demonstrates the cost to the organization of lack of engagement, that's going to also include the case for, you know, creating this culture of continuous learning that would also help them, you know, help leaders demonstrate that they care about employee development. And then people will take pride in their work and engagement will soar. So I think there's a lot of these are so intertwined. If people are engaged and you can reduce them, then it also, you know, would hopefully help you to eliminate excessive turnover and presumably aid in loss of productive time and drive innovation. So really interesting, and thank you for participating in the poll. So step 1, you're identifying those relevant impacts. And again, focusing on which ones you believe are the most costly, because when it comes to building a business case, you really want to show big numbers. You want to get people's attention. A business case where you can save a little bit of money is not nearly as powerful and doesn't get as much attention as something where you can show big numbers. So we're going to show you that in an example. So today we're going to focus on the impact of excessive turnover. Now keep in mind, as Tony said, the downloadable file that we have is going to give you examples and equations for all 6 of these impacts. So you'll have everything that you need to do this on your own. We're just going to walk through one of them. So let's say that impact of excessive turnover, that's the impact we're going to focus on. Well, in step 2, you need to write discovery questions and then use those questions to gather the right data for your case. So this is where you practice business and your business acumen. And what we're trying to do is to quantify the current situation, what we'll call what is. Okay, and we do that so that we can compare it with a future situation, which we call what could be. And when you're building the business case, sometimes your what is that you have low revenue today, and what could be is higher revenue. Other times, your what is, your current state, references higher costs that could be lower in your what could be state. And it's the discovery questions that you ask yourself that help you to ensure you're quantifying the situation like a business leader. Now, because we're talking about excessive turnover, here your questions need to identify the costs of that turnover. So first we ask, and we're doing this for both salaried and hourly workers. So you'll see, first we say, how many salaried employees have we lost in the last year that was undesirable? And let's say our answer is 25 people. And then we ask, what are the salaries for those jobs? Or you could use an average salary if you needed to. So let's just say here for ease, we're using an average salary of $120,000. Now, to make our example really easy, we are saying that there are no hourly people that we've lost that was undesirable. We're saying that that's a 0, and therefore the salaries for those jobs is not applicable. But it doesn't matter in the equation, all the numbers are going to be plugged in.
Excellent, Cheryl. So, taking the data that Cheryl just discussed, that you just captured in that, in those discovery questions, and then plugging them into the equations that are going to be on the templates, you're going to try to quantify the impact of skill gaps currently. Again, we're defining where we are today. That's that what is state. So this 1.5 multiplier used by PwC that you see on the screen here takes into account the cost of recruiting, hiring, training, right, getting people proficient, regardless of the duration of the vacancy. So as we get started in the analysis, and as we look at the data we captured in that last step, we learn that we're only looking, as Cheryl mentioned, at salaried exempt workers right now, just to keep this example easy. That means our hourly loss is 0, right? So easy peasy on the equation. When we apply the 25 salaried employees into the formula, right? Those are the folks with an average salary of $120,000 per year, times that 1.5 multiplier, you get $4.5 million. So let me just pause for a minute, right? That's the cost of excessive turnover for just 25 people. All we've done here is fill in the provided equation with the numbers that we've gathered. And remember, all this information is in the template we'll be providing.
Okay, so we looked at the PwC formula, and the more data that you have, the stronger your business case. But in the event that you have difficulty getting that data, you can use CEB's shortcut method, which is to multiply the number of days of open positions by $500. So while the example I'm about to give you is not very realistic, let's say that you had these 25 open positions and each of them was vacant for 9 months or 274 days. So you're multiplying 25 by 274 times 500, and that gives you a cost of $3.425 million. Now, for those of you who don't know CEB, you might know them by their former name, which is the Corporate Executive Board. Now, in reality, you would just add that job A was open for 280 days, Job B was open for 214 days, job C was open for 305 days, etc. And then multiply that total by 500. Now, of course, this method is only reasonably accurate because you're looking backwards. And you would be assuming that these jobs are now filled. If those jobs are not filled, then I build this business case on Monday, but by Friday it's already out of date because every day those positions remain open, the cost goes up. It's very important to document all your assumptions because all business leaders are going to ask for them. And your business case is going to be stronger when they both understand and believe the assumptions. So just to let you know where we are in our business case, we have now defined the current situation, or what is.
And so that takes us to the next step where we're going to calculate what the future could look like, right? That future state, or the what could be state. But this only works, right? This is only if we can provide a framework for employees to engage in personalized continuous learning that helps them close critical skill gaps and improve their performance. So all of this is contingent on having the right L&D program, the right framework and the right learning culture. So CEB says companies that improve development opportunities can see reduced turnover of 1/3. Robert Half says that a strong learning culture could reduce turnover by 30 to 50%, right? So some decent numbers there, but let's be ultra conservative and we'll just use 30% as the potential reduction in turnover. So we multiply our what is cost by 70%. That's because if we put this program in place, we're going to actually reduce turnover by 30%. And so the real cost now is only going to be 70%. So we take 70% of 4.5 million and we get 3.15 million as our future turnover cost, right? In essence, we're reducing our turnover cost by improving development opportunities for our employees so they stay and have the skills to contribute to their part of the corporate strategy. So that likely still feels like a big number, but I think if we put this into perspective, as we calculate the value of change, that'll be helpful.
Okay, so that brings us to step 5, calculating the value of change. So when we calculate the difference between what could be and what is in our example, you see this over here, we find that we could save $1.35 million. Now, I don't know about you, but if I walk into the CFO's office and say, do you mind if I have a minute of your time? I've got this proposal that will save you $1.35 million. They'll be pretty likely to listen. Now, we're not quite there yet, but we're close.
Great. So, another important aspect when we develop a business case, right? We want to list the intangible costs. And what we mean by intangibles are those things we know have a negative impact, but they're more difficult to quantify. So, in other words, you've got a logical business case here, but now we're going to add an emotional component. When it comes to dealing with excessive turnover, you don't just have recruiting and onboarding costs, right? You also have productivity cost, of time to proficiency, right? That's how long it's going to take the new person to be as good as the person who left. And then what about the other people in the organization? When you have excessive turnover and good people are leaving, how does that make those who remain feel, right? There's usually a loss of morale. We've all been there. We've seen this in organizations. You get this cascading effect, a loss of morale, an impact on productivity because they're still doing part of the job of the new person until they can do it independently. And then that could potentially lead to, and even likely lead to future loss of talent as people are frustrated with the situation. And that creates this downward spiral, which is difficult to quantify. But it's easy for leaders to rationalize. If the people who are leaving because they're not getting the growth and development opportunities, and we hear this all the time from our clients, from the market, surveys suggest this, big published surveys, that people are leaving their organizations explicitly because they're not getting development opportunities. So if that's happening, other talented employees are going to feel the same way, and they're going to leave for the same reason. So again, while you won't necessarily have hard numbers to share, it's important to include these intangible costs in your presentation because they do have a huge financial impact and they can be felt viscerally or emotionally.
Okay, now in step 7, we need to propose our solution. What is it that's going to take our organization from what is to what could be? And then what will be that cost? Best things in life aren't free, and we need to be sure that we present a full and honest business case to leaders if they're going to buy into what we're selling. And what we're selling is a shift from the status quo, from the mindset of training to a culture of continuous learning. Now, how will you create a culture of learning that helps to close skill gaps? How will you ensure that people can continuously upskill and reskill as needed? So let's take a step back from the numbers portion of the business case for a moment. Let's review some compelling research showing why they should embrace this solution as the solution. And we're going to put up a few quotes that we think you'll find helpful as part of your business case.
You know, the World Economic Forum, who's really at the forefront of measuring and articulating these cultural shifts in the world of work, they say that the only way forward is implementing a structure for a culture of lifelong learning and upskilling. And Deloitte agrees that organizations have to change the way people learn, and the cost of reskilling an internal hire is just a fraction of the cost of hiring someone new, right? This data point continues to be supported by recent research. It's just a couple of years old. I think this is the most eye-popping data point, right? As Deloitte quantifies that companies that openly promote learning are 3 times more profitable and have up to 4 times better retention. I mean, how's that for a stat? We just saw how expensive it is to lose employees. So when we can create an environment that makes people want to stay, we get these tremendous results. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Now, this article talks about changing from a focus on employees to a focus on learners. Training is an event, but learning is an ongoing process. So leaders know that innovation is the key to ongoing success. But if you can't create a mindset of ongoing change, growth, and limitless capability, how can you expect people to be innovative?
Now, in business terms, leaders think about company assets and they measure the income that's derived from those assets. And if you can get your leaders to think like the last CEO of IBM, who understood that skills are an asset that have to be constantly renewed, you're gonna have a different focus on perpetual skill development from the executive suite.
Now, companies like Accenture help other companies to be innovative and successful. So take a free page from their playbook by shifting from training to learning. And to make that shift, it has to be experiential, learning by doing. ATD, the Association for Talent Development, defines a culture of learning as one in which employees continuously seek, share, and apply new knowledge and skills to improve individual and organizational performance. It's the continuously part that ensures that skills keep pace with the speed of business, perpetually upskilling and reskilling. That's learning, not training. Now, just like we're teaching you like how to create a business case, you're not going to really learn it unless you do it yourself.
All right, so if the general solution is to create this culture of continuous learning, continuous lifelong learning, we have to ask ourselves, like, what are the tactics that we need to employ? How do we get there, right? How do we make this happen? To do that, we have to influence 3 groups, and we have to think strategically about those 3 groups. And we start with the leaders. It's got to be top down in this sense. You know, we need to make sure leaders understand the importance and, most importantly, the business impact of continuous learning. They need to prioritize and allow time and experiences for learning within the organizational flow, right? Within that organizational milieu. It can't be a nice to have. It has to be understood as a critical to the success of our organization imperative. We need our leaders to become learning champions, to promote it, to recognize it. They need to recognize managers who live and breathe it. They need to demonstrate that learning is truly valued. And I've never met a senior leader in an organization who themselves aren't a continuous learner. They may not have made the connection yet between how they've succeeded in life, succeeded in their role in their organization, to those activities, and how important it is to provide the opportunity for the organization at large. But when you put it that way and you help them make those connections, it's a lot easier. It helps them make the leap to recognize the importance to give everybody the opportunity to continuously learn. The next group that we need to focus on are the frontline managers, right? There's that saying about, nobody quits the company. They quit their manager. And so each manager needs to understand how important it is to regularly promote and support learning. They need to understand that every team member has to have time to learn, and they need to encourage them to share what they're learning with the team. That's how you're creating this culture of learning. We know that managers are already spread thin, so we have to make it easy for them to personalize the coaching and development of their team members without giving them something else to do. And that's really not as hard as it sounds, because we're not going to ask them to do something additional. We're going to ask them to reshape the conversations they're already having with their employees. And then finally, learners, right? We need to make sure we obviously get down to the lowest common denominator, so to speak, the broadest group, the learners themselves. Every individual has to know what they need to be able to do in their current role now and potentially around the corner. What's coming? What do we as an organization need them to be able to do and to be effective at? They need to know how they compare against those expectations. And then they need to know what specific actions they can do to develop their skills. And they want to be able to do that in the easiest way possible so that it fits within their operational rhythm. And this is critical. That's what building a learning culture is all about. It's about infusing those learning opportunities, infusing the process of learning into the operational rhythm. Learning shouldn't be a separate activity from work. It should be part of the daily flow, that daily operational rhythm. To get there, they really need to know the what's in it for me piece, right? That with them, right? If I continuously learn, how does that benefit me in my career? They want to know that they're supported, not thwarted by their managers in their journey. And when we get there, when we can help show that to employees, they're going to buy in.
Great. So let's review where we stand. You've got your numbers demonstrating the high cost of the impact or impacts being felt by skill gaps. And you've got the future reduced cost made possible by a culture that supports development, intangible costs to really drive home the full impact, lots of great research supporting the claim that a culture of learning will reduce those costs and impacts, and you've got a list of the people you need to influence. Now, to complete your presentation, you need to estimate the cost of providing a solution that helps your organization close the costly skill gaps and meet the needs of those groups. So hopefully at this point they say, okay, you've sold me. What do I need to do? And this is where you're going to propose a solution that addresses all of these impacts. So what would that look like? Well, our customers have a solution called the Self-Directed Learning Engine that meets the needs of all three audiences. So they have role-based competency models that learners and their managers use to identify what they need to be able to do. They inspire them to be great, and they enable them to power their own career exploration and development on their own timetable, increasing their job satisfaction. They also have a competency assessment system that enables learners and their managers to identify how their skills compare to the model and motivates them to take action. Now, the data from the assessments helps them to quantify and communicate capabilities to leaders. I mean, it helps you to quantify and communicate those capabilities. So they get the benefit of seeing how they compare, but all of you get that data in aggregate, and you can use that to really help. And that's really important because 45% of those of you who responded to our survey questions don't normally take this step and therefore don't have this critical data point. Now, our customers also have personalized learning plans consisting of informal learning experiences that include mentoring that enable people to learn while working. And that's what Tony was talking about fitting with their operational rhythm. So if I am learning and working at the same time, it's not something extra to do. And this also makes it really easy for managers to personalize the coaching and the development of team members. And managers get team dashboards that help them to focus their efforts on the right places by identifying skill gaps in their teams, the related business impacts that come from that, and it also helps them to pair mentors and mentees together in order to build that organizational capability. So McKinsey calls this modern mentorship, where everybody both teaches and learns. And they have a lot of writing about this as an approach to help the organization scale learning. Now, leaders can identify which strategies are likely to be the most successful based on the organizational strengths that are identified by the platform. Once they have all this aggregated data, they have this tremendous insight, and they can see the business impact of skill gaps that are holding them back. And our customers also get communication and change management materials that drive a culture of lifelong learning. So whatever the solution that you determine, identify what costs are associated with getting the right role-based competency models, informal learning that people can learn while they work, and a system for assessing skills and delivering personalized learning options.
Excellent, Cheryl. Thank you. And that was a great list of what a programmatic approach to solving this problem looks like. And so let's take that data and put some numbers against what Cheryl just showed and get back to our business case and the final step, right? This is the last step where we're going to define the cost to solving the problem, and then we're going to subtract that solution cost so that we have a total savings, a total value. So for example, let's say it were to cost you $15,000 one time to purchase role-based competency models. Okay, you got that one-time cost. And because you're likely have some staff, some professional learning professionals who could spend their time developing informal learning rather than formal learning, there's no additional cost required there. And by the way, we have content, free content to help you do that if you were interested. It's all on our website. And so let's say now you purchased software for your competency assessment and importantly, linked to delivering personalized learning. Let's say the annual cost, an average cost, maybe $60,000. So in year one, you've got that $15,000 cost for the models, and you've got the $60,000 cost for the software. So your costs are $75,000. And then year two and beyond, it's $60,000 annually because you had only a one-time upfront cost on the models. So the value of the solution in year one is that original savings, that original value of 1.35 million, and then we subtract the 75,000 expense for the program, which is still a savings of 1.275 million, almost 1.3. And then in year two, you don't have the competency models, as I said, so you're at that 1.29 million. Now, importantly, and this is where you can really demonstrate a higher value, it helps to demonstrate the lifetime value of the solution. Your organization will almost always have some total number of years it uses to evaluate a project. Certainly, if you're a mid to large size company, that's a standard operating procedure. So sometimes it's 3 years, sometimes it's 5 years. You just need to ask your finance folks and find out what it is, or the someone in operations. You then add the annual value for the for whatever that number of years is, right? And that's the value of your project that you can share with leadership. So, you know, the savings for if you're measuring as a company projects on a 3-year basis, your savings are almost $4 million. And if you're measuring on a 5-year, your savings are almost $6.5 million. So now that you've determined the relevant impacts of skill gaps within your organization, and you've developed this business case around them using the worksheet that we're going to provide that we've mentioned, think about how much value you can bring, right? Instead of having to ask for funding to create training that, you know, may or may not even address the largest skill gaps in your organization, because you may not know what those are. Imagine meeting with a chief operating officer and saying, you know, would you be interested in discussing a project we can implement in just a couple of months that would generate $6.5 million in value? I mean, this is how you become a valued partner.
I want to let that sink in a minute. I mean, can you imagine the expression on their face, especially when, you know, what you might be perceived as like the training person, right? And you walk in and you've got that kind of a proposal. That should be pretty amazing. So let's summarize what you've just heard. Skill gaps can negatively impact your company in numerous ways, and we just reviewed 6 of them. That's the ones that you see here about productive time and the long job vacancies, turnover, loss of competitive advantage, lack of engagement, and lack of innovation. Any or all of them can literally cost your organization millions of dollars. But you can prevent that from happening. Build your business case, present it to leadership. And if you're told, well, we have other priorities, it's really important that you have the confidence to look them in the eye and say firmly and confidently, what priority do we have that's more important than the ability of this organization to remain competitive? And if they still don't get on board, well, you need to prepare them for what's coming. And by that, I mean, start building a plan to address what is. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. What do we stop doing if we can't be sufficiently productive? What do we do when we have long job vacancies? Are we going to outsource? What's that going to cost? What do we do when we have excessive turnover? What operations are we going to close? What do we do when we lose our competitive advantage? We're going to lower our prices, reduce our revenue and our profitability? What do we do when people become disengaged? What do we do when our innovation fades? So Amy Borsetti, an influential talent leader, describes it like this. Okay, so you don't want to do it my way? Okay, so we're not going to meet objectives. Let's start planning for that. So here's what we need to tell investors. Here's what we need when we lose 40% of our staff. Here's what we need when people can't do the work. Let's build a plan for when that happens. Do you think your leaders are going to embrace that plan? Now, once they've bought into the need to close skill gaps, and I hope that they do, and create that culture of learning, then you need to put in place the infrastructure to enable that to happen by helping each person to become aware of the requirements, acknowledging their skill gaps and capabilities, and providing them with personalized competency-based learning to close any gaps. And we can help. So we can actually provide you with an out-of-the-box competency assessment and development tool with skills of the future or any other competency models and experiential competency-based learning built right in, or any piece of that package. So just contact us after the presentation if you're interested. Now on the screen, you can see the link to download the full set of business case guidelines. That's this top one in blue. So this link at the top will get you all the materials we've been talking about. And up in the top right, you've got a QR code that you can scan now that will enable you to download the PowerPoint. And there are a number of other resources that we decided that might be useful to you, such as how to build competency models, the upskilling, reskilling infographic, and other ways and white papers that might be useful. So hopefully this provides you with some details. I'm going to turn my video back on. So Tony, I think at this point, let's jump to the questions.
That sounds great. And if you have any questions right now, please put them into the Q&A section, and we'll try to get to as many as we can.
Perfect.
How do you want to start, Shirley? You want to jump in?
Sure. I think I can talk to the first one, and then you can add anything. So the first one in our list is, which are some of the metrics used to measure the ROI while checking their teaching is on track to achieve the intended goals within an organization? Well, hopefully we've covered some good metrics to measure, to see whether or not your what could be actually came to fruition. So for example, if you're talking about reduced turnover, well, or excessive turnover, you can look at your turnover numbers, right, and be able to actually measure those. That may take some time. When it comes to whether or not their teaching is on track, I think what you're asking is whether or not there's a change in skill. And so when our customers use a competency assessment with detailed behavioral examples to ensure that users can assess consistently and objectively, well, then as they use the system to develop, the users are reassessing, and then you can measure that change in skill as defined in the change in actual behavior. So you've got the change in skill, then you've got the change in results, which would probably be their business results. So if I'm a salesperson, am I generating more revenue? If I'm a pre-sales person, am I, having more calls? What metrics do I use to evaluate performance? And then obviously go back to the business case, and whatever the impact was, again, that might just take a little bit longer time. It might take 6 months for you to prove out that happens, or even a year. Then be measuring back to that so that you can be evaluating that your business case did come to a fruition. Tony, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. And actually, I want to take this to the next level, which is the direction that Skill Director is working with its clients really quite deeply. And that's, we're trying to move the learning and development needle to one where we can generate hard data against our program, hard business results data against our programs. We start with a leading indicator. The leading indicators are which of those competency skills that Cheryl was talking about within the competency framework, which one of those correlate to performance? And we can do that regardless of function. Excuse me. So sales is easy, right? It's hitting quota or some other hard dollar metric. That's an easy one. It could be CSAT, the customer satisfaction. It could, if you're in a say a customer service role. It could be something related to, if it's a software development team, it could be related to the team's effectiveness in driving clean or in producing clean code. Time to produce code, how much code is written per time period. Whatever the KPIs or OKRs are for that function, we can correlate from a leading indicator standpoint very quickly which of the skills in your competency framework tie to actual performance. Then it takes a step further, and based on the time it takes to sort of move the needle, so if you're sales and you're in a long sales cycle, maybe it's a 6-month or 12-month time period, you can correlate which skills have been improved, and then has that actually moved the needle for those folks who moved up in those certain skills. Again, coming back to the ones that we showed had the most impact. From there, once you've done that, you can start to measure actual dollar ROI, whether that's in revenue or in productivity, in efficiency, so cost-related savings. So that's the direction we're going. I think there's an incredible amount of interest within learning and development to understand how do we get there. You know, if you think about the Kirkpatrick model, it's really the nirvana of that level 4. And so that's what we're driving to. And I think everything we're talking about today, and as Cheryl articulated, these are excellent metrics, and we should start here, but we can even take it a step further.
Really great. Thanks, Tony. Okay, the next question was, how can a small company too busy for all this invest in the right places? And that is, you know, even a large company sometimes has a small L&D team. It's always hard to determine how to invest. And hopefully you'll be able to see that applying this business case template to your organization will tell you how much you're losing by not investing. So again, there is the investment factor, but there's also the loss factor. And so you're already losing money. You just need to show them how much they're losing and how much less they can be losing. And when you use this template, you may find that this solution will not save enough money for you. That's fine. That's actually good that you know what that is. But if you do use it, then you can determine whether there's sufficient upside that's worth changing your priorities. And if you change those priorities, then you can actually do so and invest in your people. Now, for us, it's, you know, without knowing exactly where you're investing now, it's hard for us to just tell you what, you know, how to determine what that is. But if you're spending time on developing too few people, or you're not providing what they really need, and then they leave, well, that's really the biggest loss of all, right? That's the where you've wasted your money. So it's important to figure out how to spend that money correctly, because not doing it or not making it a priority won't fix the issue. Tony, what else would you add there?
Yeah, I want to extend on something you just keyed in on, Cheryl. And I assume whoever asked this question is within L&D. So by default, then the company under question has some emphasis on learning and development. So I'll make that assumption that they at least have an L&D budget because they have at least one person staff. If you already have some L&D programs in place, what we've been talking about programmatically is to be able to identify what matters most. So you're going to have an immediate insight into where you should continue to spend. So if you have a large content library that takes a chunk of your L&D budget, you know, do you really need that entire library? Is it all being used effectively? Can you be tighter in how you're spending there so that you can spend in a more customized, personalized learning, you know, to drive a more customized, personalized learning approach? So that's, I think, the extension of what Cheryl was just saying, that should give you confidence that there's this could be cost neutral without while being significantly more impactful.
Yeah, especially if you are delivering or providing a lot of formal learning, then it may be that you can replace that, especially if it costs you money to, like if you're delivering classroom courses and there's travel involved, or you're doing live events that require instructors. If that's not the best use of money, like if that's not the skill, what could you pull out of that program and embed as workflow learning? How could you take the activities that are taking place in the classroom and instead make those activities that they can deliver on the job? We actually, one of the links that we've got in the PowerPoint will take you to a material that you can use that's all about converting existing content into experiential learning. So can you take those things that are costly to produce or deliver and make them not only more cost efficient, but better used by people so that they'll be used more frequently? And again, you get a lot more value when you get scale. Okay, next question. This one is a little long. So what's the best approach to mapping skill adjacencies between functional areas of the organization, and then using that to help convince leaders of the potential shorter times to hire through closing skill gaps by taking a chance on further developing internal talent that they would not otherwise consider. And I'm going to summarize that by it's really about internal mobility, driving the culture that leaders are looking at internal mobility and not just saying, oh, well, if you're in this role, then you can move to this role and then you can move to this role. And so if you're not in any of those feeder roles, we're not considering you. Organizationally, you want to be promoting internal mobility. And so one of the ways that our customers do it is that when you have role-based competency models and you use competency assessments that allow people to assess their skills not just on their current role, but on any role, then what you're doing is you're allowing individuals to determine, based on my current skills, which, by the way, it's not just a skill adjacency. It might be that just because I'm not using this skill that I have in my current job doesn't mean I don't have that skill. So if I can assess myself on other roles, then I can figure out, hey, these are of interest to me, and I can then leverage my manager to help support non-traditional internal mobility. That way, you really don't even need to do the adjacency work. And so those, for those of you who don't know, when we're talking about adjacency, it's people who are skilled in these areas might also be, related here. So if you've done mapping of lots of roles and they have shared skills, then that adjacency work is done. And then system administrators can actually determine who those candidates are. But even beyond that, that ability to assess myself and leverage skills that are not necessarily required in my current job, but all the skills and all my experience I bring to bear. Tony, sorry, that was a little wordy. Anything that you would add there?
I'm reading one slight addition to the question, which is this idea that we can hire people and then we have this talent, pool of talent who we can upskill to get to where they need to be. So it could be internal, but it could also be external. And this is for talent managers and hiring managers, that purple squirrel conundrum, right? That idea that, do we look for the perfect candidate who has all the skills, or do we look for a candidate who's close and who we can upskill into the role? And as we talked about at the start of this, when skills are deteriorating or degrading so quickly, when you have a half-life of skills at 2.5 years, you're never going to find the purple squirrels. They just don't exist the way that they used to. So you've got to build a new mentality in your hiring and recruiting and convey this to management, that we have to have a model where we can bring in talent that demonstrates the right aptitudes, the right behaviors, things like learning agility, interview on those things. And then that you have the formula to get people where they need to be, and recognize that it's going to constantly be changing. So that's all part of this continuous learning environment, this learning culture that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I don't think we have time to answer any additional questions, but what we'll do is on the screen, and my apologies, I'm still sharing the screen, it's got the materials on it. On the screen, you can see that there's a competency models for upskilling and reskilling LinkedIn group. So we'll post the answers to any questions that we didn't get a chance for there, so that way everyone gets the benefit of those. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure being with you today. It was great to get a chance to see you, and we hope that you enjoyed this presentation. And by all means, if you have any questions once you've downloaded the materials, feel free to connect with us. We'd love to have you.
Thank you.